Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, Paul Serb. Pleased to be joined by Washington Post NBA analyst Ben Golliver. Ben, happy Thanksgiving. Great to have you back.
Oh, thanks so much. Right back at you. Great to be back.
So tonight, the very hot LA Lakers. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to start off with this. I was going to save it for a bit later. I've got my new award, and I go back to when you were with Sports Illustrated. We know that the apocalypse is upon us.
Oh yeah.
I've got a new category, and that's the Bizarro World Awards. And I have the GM of the year, and that's Nico Harrison.
Okay.
Only he's the GM of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah.
Because that trade has been so miraculous for the Lakers. And I think it's even been accentuated with the return of LeBron James. And, it's an early sampling for sure, Ben, but out of the gate, what are we, 3 games into LeBron's return? I mean, it's not only been seamless, it's been somewhat spectacular at how much better the Lakers are with him, but how much better the Lakers are in general with fit Luka, with Ayton playing like a guy who actually wants to be on the court, with Rui Hachimura having a career start to the season, and let's not even get into Reeves. But talk about the Lakers. You know them better than anybody.
Well, I think some of it's self-evident, right? I mean, they're at the top of the standings. Luka's playing like an MVP candidate, leading the league in scoring. Reeves is playing like a first-time All-Star. And LeBron so far has bought into this idea that he's not the number 1 guy and he's not the number 2 guy. He's the connector. He's the number 3 guy, focusing more on passing than shooting. And it's really added a nice just boosted their offense even to a higher level and kind of kept everybody involved. It's allowed Luka to just play the same way he's playing. I've never in LeBron's career seen him defer the ball to somebody else to bring it up the court time and time again like he does with Luka, but he's just kind of accepting the role, which is nice to see. I think some of the stuff with the Mavericks is self-evident too, right? I mean, they're plunging down the standings. They have a horrible offense because they don't have anyone to do the things that Luka does. Anthony Davis has missed time, so obviously that kind of made a challenging situation worse. But one hypothetical I haven't seen discussed enough is, what happens if the Lakers don't actually pull off this genius trade? If they don't give Nico Harrison your Bizarro GM of the year, they would have potentially started this season with Anthony Davis injured for a full month and LeBron injured for a full month. So we could be sure Austin Reeves would have had some pretty impressive numbers during that time period, but there's no chance that they're at the top of these Western Conference standings. And so, they would have had questions, I think, really building to the point now would have been trade discussion, trade rumors. The Lakers, I think if they had started so injured, not making this trade, they'd probably be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. They might be in kind of the same situation as the Clippers are right now, where you're feeling like the season's already slipping away. So I think it's just one more thing for the Lakers fans to be grateful for here on the Thanksgiving week, right? Is this idea of like, well, the alternate reality, if they don't make this trade, they're an old superstar core. These guys are, injury prone, and they're in a situation where, they don't really have the players to, complement them quite as well. So I think ever since that moment that trade was made, the Lakers have been just cruising, and certainly it's showing through this year. And it sets up an interesting decision, I think, for LeBron. As he comes forward, does he want to retire, or is he having enough fun and they're being competitive enough that he wants to keep going? If he wants to keep going, is he happy in Los Angeles with this sort of tertiary role? I think it fits him really well, especially for this stage of his career. He doesn't have to overtax. So maybe he decides, hey, I'm okay with the Lakers. His other option, of course, would be to explore free agency this summer because he's on an expiring contract. But that's just something to watch longer term here. I think in the short term, the Lakers fans are just really happy to have a contender.
2 quick thoughts on the playing side. From LeBron's standpoint, if he chooses to embrace this, if he allows that ego adaptation, which thus far he has, what an ideal situation for a guy at 40 years old to not have to do the pounding and the physical play out front and feed off the great playmaking ability of Luka in particular, but even Reeves. I mean, he's a good passer, but and LeBron is so smart, he can utilize his basketball IQ in a way, Ben, he's never really had the opportunity to as a player in his long, illustrious, all-time career. to be able to read gaps, find openings, be able to facilitate in a completely different way on a team that has a superstar that can score in ways that, I mean, heck, even LeBron couldn't score like in his best years. Like Luka's just a unique critter in general. So on the playing side, I hope LeBron embraces it, because I can see this extending his career if he chooses to stay in LA. And can you really see at this stage of LeBron's life him being a Cavalier or another team? Like, wouldn't that to me would just have the feeling of somebody just taking their show on the road again, where he's got such a great thing in LA right now. If he stays with it, hopefully even, I mean, they could be right in the thick of it this year for a championship.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think, first of all, it's a reminder that Luka is taking the reins and taking the baton from LeBron in a way that Anthony Davis never did. There was this constant thing in LA, like LeBron's ready to hand the baton, LeBron's ready to hand the baton, and Anthony Davis just kind of kept on fumbling it. And it's just the nature of his game, right? He's not a creator. He's a play finisher on offense. And in the modern NBA, you need somebody who's creating for himself and for his teammates constantly, right? Like, that is just sort of what drives this offensive explosion era. And Anthony Davis is just built a little bit differently than that. And so that kept a huge burden on LeBron for, really the last 3 seasons, even as he's getting close to 40. That pairing, it just, Davis maybe would miss some time where he wouldn't have as big of a role offensively. LeBron would wear down. He'd get injury issues. And then in the playoffs, he just wouldn't have enough left in the tank. And so this formulation is no question better for LeBron, and it's better for the Lakers. But, you also have to ask, for LeBron, what's the note he wants to end his career on, right? Does he want to sort of be this gracious guy who proves he can play in any role with any combination of teammates? I mean, when was the last time LeBron faced the other team's, second or third best defender, right? I mean, in his prime, it was 1-on-5. You'd have 5 defenders all prepared to try to help and slow him down, and then the Warriors would throw so much attention at him. Now all that attention goes to Luka. LeBron's on the weak side. He gets to operate it, and things are a lot easier. Or maybe he gets to run a second unit where, again, he's not dealing with the toughest matchups, and so he can have a bigger impact. I think it makes a lot of sense for him, but it's always hard to read his mind, because the arguments to leave would be, well, the Western Conference is dominated by the Oklahoma City Thunder. You go play for the Cavaliers, maybe you get some more finals appearances. It's an easier path. But I think right now it's just worth monitoring. It feels like he's in a pretty good headspace, and the balance to the offense has been great. Reeves hasn't had to sacrifice a ton since LeBron came back, which is obviously what you would assume is like something would give, and maybe it would be Reeves, but it hasn't been to a huge degree. And so it just looks very healthy on the offensive end. And their chemistry and camaraderie with the Lakers is better than it's been in years. It was a transition last year. I think there was some frustration after the championship in the bubble. They had the quick turnaround, and things just kind of snowballed. They had a lot of turnover with their roster and their core players. It finally feels like they have a mix that's gelling pretty well together, and LeBron just entered back seamlessly. That was a real question. Is this going to work with LeBron after they kind of put together this winning identity without him? And it was like they didn't skip a beat.
Well, and it's such a tribute to LeBron. And again, his acumen, if he chooses to do so. LeBron can pretty much do anything, including be an effective, very good third option. And how scary is that in the NBA to have LeBron James playing really well, even at an advanced age, which he is, and for all intents and purposes, ageless in that respect. But to have him playing really well and embrace this role and be that much more of a weapon for LA and not have that friction. I'm talking with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City. So you mentioned that name, OKC Thunder. I was on another show this morning, and they said, what's it like in the NBA right now with the OKC Thunder? And what I'm curious about what your take would be on this. I said it's kind of like having a really good high school team playing in a junior high league right now. That you've got a team that you look at the way they're playing, and now tonight they have Williams coming back. For God's sakes, a top 10 NBA talent, hasn't even been there for this historic run, and now they're going to be that much stronger in terms of their personnel. Right now, Ben, you look at them and go, who's going to beat these guys?
Well, I think to build on your analogy, it's sort of like one of those basketball factory high schools out in the middle of nowhere where there's nothing else to their life except they're in boarding school, they're going to class, they're playing basketball and practicing, and they're probably waking up at 6 a.m. to clean the dorms, right? Where it's like a very structured, disciplined, almost military-like atmosphere. And then you get them on the court. That's how they play. They have the best defense I've seen, period, in the last 25 years in the NBA. I think when you're looking at all the things that you have to do to deal with modern offenses, to guard star players, take away the three-point line, protect the rim, they have no defensive weakness. And in fact, their defense is so much better than everybody else in the league. There's like this major gap. The last time I checked, the gap between their defense and number 2 was the same as the number 2 defense and number 21, right? So, I mean, they're just kind of lapping everybody else in terms of how they're slowing you down. That allows them to weather bad shooting nights or the very rare off night from Shea, and there has not been very many off nights from Shea this year, but it almost doesn't matter how they perform on offense because their defense is that elite. And yet they have a top 5 offense as well, and they're getting Jalen Williams back this week, finally, from his wrist surgery. And so that's why I wrote a big story this week saying, we really need to be serious about 70 wins here. That is hallowed ground in the NBA. It's the kind of thing where if you talk about it, you jinx it, sort of like a no-hitter or a perfect game in baseball. But everything that the 2016 Warriors were doing when they started off so hot and were able to get the record with 73 wins, when a lot of people didn't think that record was ever going to be broken, and the Bulls record, with 72, the Thunder are doing the same thing. They're elite on offense. They're elite on defense. They're super consistent. They have an amazing home court advantage. They're great in third quarters. That was one of the main things with the Warriors is they might kind of screw around for the first half, but in that third quarter, they would blitz you off the court. They'd hit you with like 3 or 4 3-pointers and the game would be over. The Thunder, the last time I checked, had like a plus 30 net rating in third quarters. So it's like, as soon as it's time to get serious, they get so serious. And that allows them to keep the minutes off their main guys in the fourth quarter, which was a real key for the Warriors too. I mean, the big thing back then was joking about, well, when do the ice bags come out, right? When does Steph get to put the ice on his knees and Iguodala, when do they get to ice their knees? And you can kind of pace yourself over the course of the season if you get to rest through the whole fourth quarter. Well, Shea has played 0 minutes in more than half the fourth quarters this season because they just haven't needed him. They've been up by 20 points. And so you put all these things together, their depth, their discipline, the fact that they've done it before, so they have the confidence, in terms of getting to like 68 wins, winning the championship. It's very similar to that 2016 Warriors group, which was coming off a title in 2015. They were flush with confidence. They didn't have any more doubts that they knew how to play, and they intimidate people. And I've seen just a ton of respect this year. I thought last year with the Thunder, it was a lot of whining. They bait the officials. It was a lot of kind of that pushback. This year, it's been a lot more about just respect rather than begrudging respect or trying to undercut their accomplishments. And in some cases, it's, opposing fan bases just kind of scratching their heads saying, what do we do? And the question I would ask everybody when you're laying out the championship field here, who matches up well with them? Who presents matchup problems for them? And the answer is, well, Nikola Jokic is awesome. That's the only answer I've got. Nobody else in the league creates matchup problems for them. I think the Lakers at full strength would be an interesting matchup just because they have, multiple big players on the perimeter. But even then, I'll trust Oklahoma City's cohesion and young legs. And outside of Denver with Joker, who's obviously going to be a matchup problem for everybody, they just handle your best player very well. When they played the Warriors, Steph Curry really struggled to even get shots off. He was not really a big impact maker. And then you go right down the list from there. I would take them handily over a team like Detroit, which has been a great story, but they're just much further along in the developmental cycle than the Pistons are, and they have way more options. They have 5 different guys they could throw on Cade Cunningham. Right? I mean, it's just an embarrassment of riches. So, it's a good time to be a Thunder fan for sure. And I think if you're a fan of basketball history, and I know you are, there's a real chance that we see the third team ever to win 70 games this season in the NBA. And that would be pretty special.
It really would be special. And if they stay healthy, that certainly isn't out of the realm of possibility, and even breaking the record isn't out of the realm of possibility, Ben. Now, we always know there's always the big asterisk, no matter what team it is. about the big eye injury, how that can change a season. I think back to the 1978 Portland Trailblazers. They were on a tear until Bill Walton got hurt. Now, the Blazers aren't the Thunder. The Blazers of 78 aren't the Thunder, but it completely changed the dynamic of the season. It goes without saying, certainly. Jokic is a matchup problem for anybody. Denver is improved this year, but as they've demonstrated, they still have gaps that the Thunder just don't have. Like you said so eloquently, where do you start with this team? Gilgeous-Alexander has been impeccable. Still, in most people's mind, he's behind Nikola Jokic because of the unreal season he's having, and it is unreal. What Jokic is doing is unreal. What are your thoughts on the kind of new ground that I think this guy is breaking as a point center? God knows what he is, just absolute monster out there in the way he beats you, how he beats you, what he does. It really is incredible to watch, isn't it?
No question. I saw him come here to play the Clippers a couple weeks ago, and he had 25 points in the first quarter. And I looked around and said, "Well, technically, he's on pace to match Wilt here. We should all be getting ready just in case we have to file stories right at the buzzer saying we just witnessed history." And it felt like he could get 100 if he wanted to. He was just in complete command. Let me just say a final point on Oklahoma City in their chase for 70. There's no question Shea's health is like the top priority. Everything changes for them offensively when he's not on the court. But they managed Chet Holmgren missing multiple months last season, and Isaiah Hartenstein, their center, missing multiple months last season, still got to 68. Jalen Williams is a top 15 player, maybe a top 10 player in the NBA this season. He hasn't played a single second yet to this point of the season. And so their depth gives them a nice buffer against a lot of teams. And I think really important to point out, this is a bottom-heavy season. You have a bunch of teams that are tanking because we have such a great draft class, right? There's probably 3, 4, 5 guys who could be franchise changers this year in the draft class. And you have a lot of teams kind of doing the same thing that happened with Golden State in 2016. You look around and say, are we going to beat these guys? No, we're not going to beat these guys. They got, way too much talent. Why don't we go the other direction and try to beat them in 5 years, right? Let's play the tank game. And so that creates a situation where Oklahoma City gets a lot of easy wins along the schedule. And even for teams that aren't intentionally trying to tank, you have a disappointing team in Memphis. You have a disappointing team with the Clippers. You have a disappointing team with the Dallas Mavericks. That's just, it's a weaker conference in the West. It's not as deep, I should say, in terms of contenders. And so that really could help fortify Oklahoma City over the course of the season, where they can kind of keep this machine rolling, because instead of getting really nasty back-to-back, so you got 3 games in 4 nights against all teams that are contenders, you might have one tough game a week that you can really get up for, and you have some other soft ones along the way. So that's why I'm really just encouraging everybody who cares about the history stuff. Keep an eye on these guys. They're 18-1, all-time best point differential to this point. They have a lot of factors in their favor that could help them get up to 70 or potentially beyond. Now, in terms of Jokic, it was a masterclass when I saw him a couple weeks ago. And what was so interesting was the game plan was, even though he's arguably the most skilled scorer in the NBA right now, which I'd say he probably would be. If you need a basket, you need to win one game, you probably start with him, as great as Shea is, right? But the Clippers' game plan was, we're going to let him be a scorer. We're going to take away the assists, and so he had 55 points, and they didn't take away anything. He was scoring from every different, length, at the rim, little push floaters, at the free throw line. He just had a counter for every possible defender that he was going against, any possible defensive look he was going against. And, the Clippers aren't the best team, but that's the most vivid memory I have from him this season. And when they put in a guy like Brook Lopez off their bench because they just needed to fill time and they're hoping to throw a big body on a big body, what Joker did was, he looked at Brook Lopez and he said, I know you're one of these pioneers of the stretch 5. I'm just going to take you outside because you can't stay with me anymore. You're getting a little too old. And I'm just going to shoot 3-pointers right in your eyeball. And he just hit shot after shot after shot over the top of Brook Lopez. And so you got the tallest guy and the biggest guy, the heaviest guy on the court hitting from 35 feet. At that point, really, what are you supposed to do? I think with the questions with Denver, though, Cam Johnson, it was one of those classic Moneyball moves for them of we're going to get rid of Michael Porter Jr. and we're hoping to get like 80% of the production for 50% of the cost. That has not happened. Cam Johnson really hasn't quite, hit the ground running, so to speak. And, you go back to even like his Phoenix tenure, he was not a big impact guy in the big games, the big moments. And there were still some kind of questions about, okay, is he somebody you could really count on in the clutch? And you're going to need all 5 of your starters to be great to beat Oklahoma City. So I think the question there still lingers for Denver. Unfortunately, Aaron Gordon's hurt. He's a major X factor for them. Now, he's not super serious. He will be back. But, of course, you want as much time where they're at full strength and rolling to kind of build up that chemistry as possible. And I think guys like Brown, Murray, and Jokic, you know exactly what you're getting from them. They've played a million games together. So, like you said, they're not as deep. They're not as talented as Oklahoma City, but they were right there with them in last year's playoffs. And I think the key to kind of getting over the hump is Joker's got to be fresher. By the time they get to that series, he was putting a lot of miles, on his tires at the end of last season, just playing huge minutes. They were running him into the ground. It started to show a little bit. And the other key is going to be this Cam Johnson addition. He has got to be a guy where if the ball kicks to him in the corner, he can hit clutch three-pointers with the series on the line, with the season on the line. He can't be one of these guys who passes out of that shooting opportunity and kind of, kills the possession because he doesn't want the moment. And so far, that's what I would be nervous about if I was a Denver fan, because I'd be saying, well, did we get Joker enough help this offseason? We definitely got more help, right? But did we get him enough help? And, it could also be a team potentially that would want to explore stuff at the trade deadline too, to say, hey, we're one of the very few teams that could push Oklahoma City. Maybe we've got some chips here. Maybe we can manufacture another player or two to kind of bolster this rotation.
It's interesting that you talk about the mileage on Joker, because as superhuman as he is, as unbelievable as his performances have been, we are in the first quarter of the season, and it's the mileage at the end of the season, which, to your point about OKC and being able to rest SGA for long, long periods of time, whole quarters, and the weakened Western Conference, those are all really valid points. I think one of the thoughts in Denver would be that Valanciunas would be able to come in and spell Joker effectively, and I think Jonas can, to be honest. But here's the question, and I'm kind of segueing this over to Steve Kerr's comments, Ben, about injuries in the NBA, because you're hitting on the key element here, I think, too. A reasonably rested Jokic going into the playoffs, that might change the balance a little bit versus a banged up, overused Jokic going in. And my point is this: Kerr talks about, shortening the season, all valid considerations about the mileage that players put on today compared to what they used to put on in terms of defending. But to me, part of it is how coaches coach. At certain junctures, coaches have to go a kind of anti-Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah.
He'll you 49 minutes out of 48 if he can. If he feels he needs to, he'll do that every night. But a lot of coaches play their stars so much through the year when at times they just need to put the other guys in and let them go and learn how to live with the results so they don't the mileage doesn't add up quite as rapidly throughout the course of the regular season. Easier said than done, I realize. But I think a lot of it does come down. I don't think the NBA has ever been deeper, and certainly there's no Jokic substitution. But what are your thoughts on that, on the usage rate that a player like Jokic, that a coach has to look at Jokic and say, you know what, I got to sit you for 10 to 12 minutes a game?
First of all, I think that they have really liked Jonas there in Denver. I think that's a great point. From a chemistry fit, personality fit, all that kind of stuff. It's just his talent level. They've missed a guy in that spot for years and years and years. They had a nice, locker room guy in DeAndre Jordan, but maybe not quite the same player that Jonas can be right now. Right. But, I think last season is the perfect example of this dilemma you're talking about with the coaches. You're Michael Malone. The season's starting to slip. Your choices are keep playing Joker and maybe save your job, or trust some young guys who you've never trusted for years. And if you lose some games, they're going to fire you. Well, I know which way I would go. I'd probably be trusted Joker. You're seeing a similar thing with the Clippers right now, right? With James Harden. He's like their only consistent contributor. He props up the entire team. Kawhi Leonard's been in and out of the lineup. Bradley Beal's already out for the season. So your options are, well, you try to work some younger guys into the rotation, see what they can give you. That's okay. But if you take James Harden off the court, the offense falls to pieces. So what do? Well, you run up James Harden's minutes and you risk an injury there. That, it's sort of a ticking time bomb situation. So it's very challenging for these teams that don't have the depth. Once again, nobody's doing it better than Oklahoma City. Jalen Williams is out. They don't have to rush him back because they have a developmental pipeline where AJ Mitchell is just ready to go. And he's had a great breakout season, arguably the most improved player. He's doing all this stuff that he didn't even have a chance to do last season. And, even Isaiah Joe, I would say, has taken a step forward for Oklahoma City. Time. And so they have learned to manage the minutes. And by the way, Shea has played his lowest minutes this season since his rookie year. So you talk about advantage going into a potential matchup in the playoffs where Shea is completely rested. Joker's probably going to have a little bit more of a burden because of their lack of depth, even with Valanciunas. That could be something that kind of, swing things a little bit. Another factor to consider here, though, is the idea of the race for the 2 seed. I'm starting to hear from a lot of different teams where it's like, okay, we saw Oklahoma City win the conference last year by like 16 games. So just kind of assume that they're going to do that again. When do you want to play Oklahoma City? Well, obviously you would love to have the 2 seed so you could delay that matchup as long as possible. Maybe you get lucky, something goes wrong for them and they go out early, right? Well, Denver's going to be highly motivated to get that 2 seed because last year they kind of screwed around at the end of the season, didn't get it, and had to play Oklahoma City in the second round, right? The Lakers, obviously, they would love to delay the Oklahoma City matchup as long as possible because it's going to be a tough head-to-head showdown for them, right? So you could actually see some of these coaches running up minutes on their guys again in pursuit of the 2 seed because they feel like that's in their best interest to try to win a championship. So I think, it's a very challenging situation for a coach to manage, right? To understand where's the right number at, how can you work in rest days? How can you avoid the overuse? And I think the players who have really come out on top in recent years have been the guys who are the most durable. Joker has this just uncanny durability that keeps him on the court. And Shea has done a great job of managing his style of play, just taking care of his body, making sure that he's ready to go. And he's been on the court a lot. And that's really kind of what's kept them in it. So, I think there's a lot of truth to what Steve Kerr says. I mean, to me, it's kind of self-evident. If you're running around at a faster pace, covering more ground, you're liable to have more soft tissue injuries. Seems completely logical. The only way to undo those injuries is to slow the game down or to reduce the amount of three-pointers that are being taken. We don't see anything in the trends that suggest it's going to go that direction, right?
That ain't happening.
Yeah. So you just kind of have to pace yourself and add depth, right? The Pacers had a ton of success last year by, going 10 deep. I think another team that's interesting, it's not a top-heavy team, but they are winning a little bit with depth this year and bounce scoring, is the Toronto Raptors, a little bit of a surprise team. Again, where it's like, hey, we don't have to put everything on one guy's shoulders, right? Brandon Ingram can get 20, but we don't need him to get 30. We don't need him to have the huge usage rate because Scotty Barnes is there, because Quickly is there, because RJ is there to kind of, carry the load a little bit. I think that formula is working pretty well for a lot of teams, right? It's not like there's only one way to do it. I mean, we still see Luka with a huge usage playing the way he wants to play. But I think that some of these teams that are popping up here are the teams that are deep and they're balanced and they're able to kind of, keep the huge amount of wear and tear off any one guy.
I'm talking to Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City. Ben, you make such a great point about usage, about Luka playing heavy minutes, but playing the way Luka plays. Part of the injury quotient, I think, is exactly that, is playing at the pace that you want to play at and being able to control the pace in the way that you want to control the pace. And Luka and Jokic do that along with Shea. Those three do it better than anybody that I've ever really seen, because a lot of the times they're not playing vertically. They're playing horizontally and they're playing at their pace, controlling their defender. and controlling the way they want to play and how they want to get to the basket. Luka, for instance, holds on to the ball. Probably, I would guess his hanging on to the ball is more than anybody in the league. I would guess that. Right now, I haven't looked at that stat, but he can do that because of the way he controls his defender with his body, and he doesn't rely on jumping over people to score. I think that's one of the aspects of the NBA that's made it as entertaining as I've seen for a long, long time to watch this year, is we truly are seeing a variety of styles of play, both by individual players, but also by teams. We're not seeing the same formula in every team that seemed to be getting more and more generic. Small ball, got to shoot tons of threes. That's still all happening, but the way it's happening is different.
No question.
And I think that's another OKC carryover, is they've done such a remarkable job of taking their talent, and of course they got a ton of it, and a lot of it in a lot of players, but adapting their system to their talent. I see that as a real trend in the NBA, and I think that's hugely positive for the watchability of the NBA.
There's no question about it. I mean, first of all, I think we've seen a shift from, just on your point with Shea and Joker and Luka, we've seen a shift from pure athleticism to touch and feel over these last few years when it comes to superstar level players. Athleticism gives at a certain point. Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, those guys, they're sort of hitting walls in the middle of their career because they can't play the same way and stay healthy over the course of an entire season. Launching yourself at the rim, 15 times a game, it's not sustainable, right? And Luka, Joker, and Shea just don't have that problem. It's a more ground-bound style like you're describing. It's more subtle. You're operating with the scalpel, not the chainsaw. And they're able to get it done. And this season, thankfully, have been pretty healthy. On the stylistic diversity point, it's an excellent one. I think when you go back to the Warriors of 2016, that era, everybody rushed to copy them because of the math. And they started to realize, look, if they're going to outshoot us, we have no chance to keep up here unless we dramatically increase our three-point shot. So we have to get really creative, space the court, put 1 million players on the court. Everybody has to shoot threes. Otherwise, you're just dead in the water. That was the response to Golden State's offense. I think what you're seeing with Oklahoma City's defense, it is so rare to get professional players to play as hard as they do, as disciplined as they do, and as together as they do. If I'm a coach of a rival team, I'm looking at Oklahoma City and saying, I can't mimic this. There's no way for me to do this. They've built up this infrastructure with the G League team and the kinds of guys they've drafted, certain personality characteristics. They've built this identity really over the last 7 years, probably, if not longer, right, to get to the point where they are. You can't just, snap your fingers and say, we're going to play defense like Oklahoma City in the NBA. It's never going to happen. It's just on a consistent basis, not possible. And so what you're seeing is the coaches have to get more aggressive. So Eric Spoelstra saying, well, guess what? We're just not going to run pick and roll anymore. We're just going to drive at the rim, spread everybody out, and we're going to play as fast as humanly possible. You're seeing Portland say, well, we're going to do full court pressing. That's going to be one of our little, twist to things and see how well that works. And some of these experiments, by the way, haven't worked. Like Portland, half their roster's injured, right? I mean, their style of play that they wanted to, I call it 48 minutes of hell, like the old Nolan Richardson thing. I mean, they're really trying to pressure you and make you uncomfortable, backcourt turnovers, inbound violations. Like that's really what they're going for. And it was a beautiful sight to see for a couple of weeks. Then half their team got hurt. So, okay, now what do you do? So I think there's a lot of experimentation going on right now because people are looking at this Oklahoma City defense and saying, hey, we can't copy this. We can't even do a poor man's impression of it.
Well, and I love the 48 minutes of hell. I think back to Rick Pitino when he went to the Celtics and he was going to throw the full court press in and he was going to trap and do all that stuff. Lasted about 5 minutes. I mean, when you have Antoine Walker, who never ever believed that defense was a part of the game, you're not going to get buy-in from players like that. But the fact that coaches are willing to experiment, I think that's extremely healthy for the league. But I also think, again, net impact. Oklahoma City, as you point out so well, they play so hard and they play so well together. You can play as hard as Oklahoma City. You may not be as good, but you can match their effort. That's a choice. Yeah. And you can play together to the best of your ability, like Oklahoma City does, as long as you're enabled by your coaching staff with a style that suits your personnel. That's what I like. I think the example that you made of everybody trying to imitate the Warriors when they weren't capable of it, but it gave the pocket pencil analytics guys down in their basements the opportunity to say, hey, statistically, we got to all do this. And look at the result. A lot of bad shooting teams were taking way too many threes and underperforming and never, ever reaching anything close to what the Golden State Warriors did, who, by the way, still were running actions and taking mid-range shots in the midst of all the threes. Kerr's way too good of a coach to have abandoned that completely. But I did want to segue again to another coach that you mentioned, and that's Spoelstra. If anybody ever doubted how great a coach Eric Spoelstra is, they have to eat their words now, finally, because the guy is a great coach. I think historically he's a great coach. But the way he's adapted his team, again, suits his personnel, and it's bringing out such great things from the talent that he has. It's made Miami a much more compelling team in the East and a tough team to beat night in and night out.
Well, I get a lot of things wrong over the years, but back in 2011, I said Eric Spoelstra should be the next coach of USA basketball because he understands how to coach defense. He understands how to connect with superstars. He understands how to build a locker room, and he has the right basketball values in terms of all the heat culture stuff that we talked about. And, as it turned out, they went to Popovich and then Kerr, and now they've gotten around to Spoelstra finally here, more than 10 years later. But I think he's the right type of guy, the right personality to run that program. And, this Miami situation was very interesting. I think it's a great example of being self-aware. Miami is coming into the season, or they're doing their offseason planning, and they're like, look, we even in a weak Eastern Conference, we don't have the top-end talent to keep up with the best teams in this conference, right? Especially like New York or Cleveland, who are coming back on paper as the best teams, right? Miami, they lose Jimmy Butler. They're kind of waiting for their next superstar. It's the perfect time to experiment. It's because there's nothing to lose. It's like, okay, well, if you have a sub 500 season this year, it's not the end of the world. You're kind of a way station for superstars. Guys always want to go play there. You're just kind of sort of waiting for the next guy who wants to get there. And so how do you best use that time? How is that time the best well spent? And they looked at the players that they were able to bring in, like a Norman Powell from the Clippers, and they said, well, we got a lot of potential scoring talent here. Even if we don't have a superstar like A-list lead guy, let's design a system that turns all of these B-plus offensive players into an A group, right? Where it's like, we're just kind of coming at you from every side. It's going to be very difficult. I actually happen to be a little skeptical of what they're doing. I think it's a little gimmicky,
It is.
Because you get into a playoff matchup, a team's ready for it, the game slows down. I think some of the advantages they're creating are going to come back to earth a little bit. But especially when they don't have Tyler Hero because of an injury to start the season, this is exactly what they needed. It's something to kind of prop up these loose pieces and turn them into a group. And on top of it, it's been really fun to watch, because, literally, it's not even 7 seconds or less. It's like 4 seconds or less, they're running off of inbound passes from the sideline. And it's just like they're trying to get up ahead of steam and pushing it. They're running off of other teams' makes and trying to beat you down the court and create advantage there. A guy like Jaime Jaquez has really rediscovered his impact on games. And, he just wants to put his head down, and sometimes he almost looks like a poor man's Giannis. It's just like doing whatever he possibly can to bull rush to the rim. So this is fun stuff. Again, how substantive is it? I don't know. I just don't think if they were trying to do what OKC was doing, or they're trying to copy what the Warriors formula from the past, it's not going to take them any further, right? And so why not experiment, see what does work, and then in future years maybe you keep some of these same elements as you go forward. And of course, now we wait to see, does anybody copy their strategy, right? Are there any other teams that are saying, hey, this looks pretty fun. It's working for them. It's putting a lot of strain on opposing teams' defenses. Maybe we should try out never doing pick and rolls and just completely zagging where everybody else is going the other way,
Well, and it to me, it's just refreshing to watch somebody not running the pick and roll because it's such a predictable part of the NBA game to see somebody just go so counterintuitively. The other thing that I like about it, and I liken it to when Steve Nash was in Phoenix, Steve and Steph Curry in Golden State, they were both unleashed by their coaches, Curry and Nash, that in other situations would have had very different careers. Like Curry still would have been a great 3-point shooter, but he wouldn't be the shooter that he is today had he not been in Golden State under that regime. Same with Nash and Phoenix in the 7 seconds or less. If he had stayed in Dallas with Dirk, he would have had a great NBA career, but he would never have been a 2-time MVP, and he never would have been a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Could be wrong. But I think what is going on in Miami is Norm Powell, who I've always loved. I love seeing a player like Norm Powell, kind of a blue-collar regarded guy. All of a sudden, he's white-collar. Like, Norm's really good, and he's unleashed. Same with Jaquez. He's unleashed now. In this system, they're able to express themselves and to demonstrate their talent because they don't have any reins on them. And that can be the net outcome of this. I agree with you. When they get to the playoffs, they're not going to be able to do it like this. But it certainly sets both of these players and other players on the team up for better performances and better careers because they're allowed to just get out and play.
It's one of the benefits of not running the pick and roll is that you take out the hierarchy element, right? With the pick and roll, what it says is, well, the guy who has the ball in his hands is the most important person. Everybody else is kind of serving that person. Either you're setting the screen for him to make his life easier and let him create an advantage, or you're standing as far away as possible to create as much space as possible. And in some cases, you're standing in the corner, literally with your hands up, waiting to maybe get a pass, but also maybe not get the pass, right? So it takes a lot of the motion, a lot of the flavor out of offense, and it takes role players who might have, like I said, B+ or A- potential, and it just kind of turns them into cogs, right? And so that's why you're seeing the bump. The Norm Powell story, I think, is really interesting because he had a great year for the Clippers last year. And he started the season by coming out and saying, well, Paul George leaving is addition by subtraction because everybody else is going to be able to step up and fill in the gaps. And he caught some backlash for that. People were like, whoa, who's Norm Powell to talk about Paul George like this? Paul George, probably a future Hall of Famer, an all-star guy. And as it turned out, Norman Powell was completely right. It was addition by subtraction. The Clippers had a great season. And then this summer, the Clippers don't keep Norm Powell. They decide to maybe get a little too cute. They don't pay him. They trade him to Miami, and now it's been subtraction by subtraction because the Clippers miss Norm Powell so badly. And the guys they brought in to try to replace him, whether it was John Collins or Bradley Beal, have just been a complete disaster. I mean, Beal already hurt. I mean, he got out for the season with a fluky hip injury in basically like a week or two of games. And then with Collins, he's one of the worst defensive players in the NBA. I mean, this guy, the other night against the Lakers, I was watching him. He probably gave up 40 points single-handedly because he just didn't know where he was supposed to be on the court. I mean, play after play after play, he's getting picked on. And so, Norm Powell won the summer on that one. There's no doubt. And a lot of Clippers fans really miss him. I can attest. And I know the Raptors fans up in Toronto probably do too.
They do. I thought it was really a mistake when they didn't keep Powell because there was something in his game. It's kind of an old school jump shot game that I love personally. I love the guys that elevate, release at the top of their elevation. And he was always aggressive. And it was just like, if he could ever find the right system and the way that allowed him to play downhill, like they're doing in Miami now, the way he is and score in a variety of ways, it's really been fun to watch. This is a bit of a stretch, Ben, but it's one of my kind of mad scientist stuff in the basement with beakers and stuff like that, going on. But to me, Miami's taking advantage of the no pick and roll because of the defensive 3-second rule. You've got to spread the defense out anyway. And if you've got guys that can beat you off the dribble and are pushing the ball so hard and forcing the defense to get back and be on their heels, and you're attacking them right out of the, so quickly and looking for a shot opportunity within 7 seconds or 4 seconds, like that's so much pressure on the defense. But you add defensive 3 seconds into that, and you have to get out of the lane. That opens up more attack opportunities, which to this point have worked really well because your help side restrictions in the NBA are so unique to that league. And this is my mad scientist stuff. This ties into Steve Kerr's remark. You want to cut down steps in games? Take the defensive 3-second out. let Rudy Gobert park in the middle and force teams to now have to beat you in different ways. Boy, does the game change then. You're going to be running a lot less because you can throw a big 2-3 zone out there, matchup zone, and would that ever change the league, becoming more of a FIBA league? I know that won't happen. The entertainment value of the defensive 3 seconds rules, it's still one of the rules old guys like me can't take, but that's all right. That's all right.
Well, a couple other rules the NBA did tweak to kind of fuel the pace. Remember they took the 10-second backcourt and they turned it into 8 seconds.
Yes.
And then they took the 24-second shot clock reset and they took that to 14 seconds.
Yes.
And so when you see the shot clock reset, there's no delay. It's noticeable if you go back and watch old games where imagine Houston right now with their amazing offensive rebounding, they could have like 5-minute long possessions. It'd be like watching a football team where they just run the ball every play to go 80 yards in like 10 minutes, slow the game down completely. Houston would be doing stuff like that with their big guys. And so, as the NBA weighs possible solutions, they do have a little bit of, blood on their hands a little bit. They have engineered some of this pace increase.
Yes,
it's not just been about, coaches are getting in the lab and wanting to play faster. That's certainly a lot of it. But the NBA has also facilitated that by saying, you got to bring the court up, ball up the court faster every time. And then if there's an offensive rebound, you got to get right into something, right? You got to get it back up quickly because you don't have time to delay. And so I wonder if they ever did conclude, hey, there's just too much injuries here. Like our style of play, we can't keep guys on the court. Everybody's injured. And it seemed like there for a week or two, every star player practically was injured in the NBA besides like 5. If they reach that conclusion, they could potentially roll back those rules. That would slow the pace just automatically, right? And I don't know if they would consider that. Probably not. Like you said, they seem to like the kind of carnival speed to the whole thing. And, that's obviously it's more soccer-like, it's free-flowing. I think a lot of people enjoy watching that style, but they did put their hand on the scale a little bit. They could take their hand off if they wanted to.
Well, and the NBA for a lot of years has been dealing with a reduction in viewers in the U.S. The way they've grown their viewership is internationally. The way that they have been losing viewers, and a lot of people were, I think it's fair to say, going away from the game because it became a huck and chuck style of play where getting down court, taking the first 3 that you get, running back down court, and there are some grotesque sequences that you watch in highlights of where teams literally are doing that and turning the ball over at the same time. And it can be a horrific style of play, but as we were talking about earlier, I think that's changing. And that kind of leads me to kind of my next thought process is I think what we're seeing now, and you and I touched on this the last time we talked, Ben, about the evolution of SGA as a player with all of the nuances in his game. But I think in the NBA in general, what we're seeing is the culmination. It's not a finished process, but it's the culmination of the years and decades of improvements and metrics in how players train, how they learn, the way that disciplines have evolved and how you learn how to shoot, how you become a better basketball player. And my God, like Luka and Jokic, we talk a lot about the international players and how they're so dominant in the NBA because of it, and it's because of their skill sets and the fundamentals that they develop at a young age. And more fundamentally sound, better athletes are now part of the game where 1 through 14, you've got phenomenal players where in the old days, like if you look at the Boston Celtics team in 1986, one of the great teams of all time, you go 9 through 12, that's not a good team. That's not a good group of guys. But now that doesn't happen anymore. They're not the players that are on the court. So I just think, we really have gone to another plateau now of what players are able to do consistently and how much more fundamentally sound they are combined with style of play and pace of play. I think that's really bringing the watchability up to a different level as well.
No question. I mean, I was interviewed last year, one of the top 25 high school prospects in his class, and he was talking about some of the guidance that he actually gets from NBA personnel. He was part of one of these programs where the NBA invite these kids to All-Star Weekend. They have like a mentorship thing. They're trying to kind of help mold these guys. And one of the messages they were essentially telling him was like, look, not everybody's going to be the alpha once they get to the NBA. You can make nine figures in a career if you're a 3-and-D shooter, right? So this guy was already kind of conceiving of what's my professional role going to be when he was 15 or 16 years old. And for him, it was like, well, I better be able to shoot the basketball. I better be able to defend multiple positions. I better be coachable and willing to, accept, criticism. And I better be able to play without the basketball, right? And so he was already kind of thinking that way. And so he can't be the only person who's getting these messages, right? I mean, I think there's a real trickle down. And I think that everything has been flowing pretty smoothly now because of the NIL era, where it's like not everybody's worried about these rules. You can get paid when you're 15, 16 years old. You get paid when you go to college. You get paid when you come to the NBA, and then you get your really big contract, right? And so I think that, all that money flushing into the system, all the advisors and the strength coaches. I did a story on Cam Boozer at Duke, and his father was like, "Yeah, I spoil my kids. I made a ton of money in the NBA." Carlos Boozer, he said, "Of course I spoil Cam Boozer and Caden Boozer. I'm trying to get these guys ready for big time basketball. They want to be NBA players, and we're going to give them every advantage." And so, I mean, he had an agent advising them. He had weight trainers advising them, personal skill development coaches as they're coming up through high school, and they really got serious about basketball all the way down in the middle school levels. And so once you have such an efficient system that's really capturing talent at 10, 11, 12 years old, you're going to get a large quantity of capable players who are going to step in and fill these spots. But to me, the differentiator at the very, very highest level of the players is the guys who have touch and feel now, right? If you have access to the best weight training, dietitians, if you're doing sleep science, if you're not drinking after every game, if you understand the value of not using drugs, right? Like if you just have your life together, but you don't know how to pass a basketball, you don't know how to run an offense, you're caught up too much in one-on-one, that's going to leave you at the all-star level. It's not going to leave you at the best player in the sport level, right? And so when I'm looking at the very best guys right now, and, to me, Joker, Luke, Shea, that's probably the tier, maybe throw Giannis in there as well. Those guys understand how to keep their teammates involved, when to pass, how to run an offense and keep people guessing. And in many cases, those guys have extraordinary vision as well. I think that's the biggest differentiator right now. And I think, the crop of all-star level talent is very deep, very good, very diverse positionally. But, if I'm drafting at the top of the board, that's like the first question I'm asking is, does this guy, can he pass the ball well enough to lead an offense? Because if that's not part of his skill set, he better do everything else amazing. Otherwise, he might not reach the absolute highest highs.
I'm talking to Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on the deep dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Ben, that kind of leads me to another point. And this is for another time. Is what you've just described is the creme de la creme, the top of the food chain. And then you go down a layer, and yes, you're dealing with all these athletes, which is the point I was making. All these athletes with these tremendous skills, that does not necessarily translate into touch and feel. And then you go down even lower where the coaching is questionable, where the training is oftentimes off of YouTube videos. And it's a lot of fancy ball handling and huck and chuck and playing tons and tons of games on the AAU circuit and within each state. You've got for-profit entities running out all over the place, convincing kids and families and everything. This is what you got to do to get to the big time, blah, blah, blah. More ways to get paid. The basketball landscape is so different. It's Mars now compared to 10 years ago. It's a different planet altogether. And there's still a lot of guys that look great that can't play. Yeah. And the best of the best are the guys, like, again, the Joker can't jump over a town of 2000's phone book. That's not his game. He just will molest and maul you with his mind and his skills. Luka won't blow. He doesn't blow by you. He goes with you and through you and past you, just using his touch and feel. Like that sense for the game, that actually existed in an era gone by, kind of got lost in athleticism and into the AI. Now it's coming back at a much higher level, but it's coming back. Think of Magic Johnson. Touch and feel. Larry Bird, touch and feel. My God.
Yeah, and I think Jordan, too, was probably underrated from a touch and feel standpoint, just because, he's obviously more interested in scoring rather than passing. But, he knew how to run an offense. I mean, he put up huge, almost triple-double numbers, for a year there when he was kind of serving as a point guard early in his career. I think this draft class is a really interesting example of what the dynamics we're talking about. Cooper, amazing touch and feel, all-around game, but not the elite alpha scorer yet, and that kind of remains to be seen. But he went number one overall. He won all these games in high school and college because there was no weakness really to his game, and because he was willing to play without the ball, willing to move the basketball, knew what to do with it when it was in his hands, and just a polished player. Con Knippel, probably the rookie of the year favorite right now with Charlotte. I mean, I don't know what the weakness is to his offensive game. I mean, boy, he could play on, he could play off, he could shoot it. I mean, amazing three-point shooting numbers, confident, great form, textbook in a lot of ways. I saw one of his teammates say, well, he's already our best player. It's like, well, that doesn't normally happen when you've got LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, who are, other really high recent draft picks who are much further along in their careers than he is. But he's made that kind of an impact because he has that skill set. Dylan Harper, unfortunately for San Antonio, hasn't got a chance to play a lot. But when he did play, man, he looked really polished going to the basket. And, when he was injured, San Antonio was really struggling to fill in what he was able to do before De'Aaron Fox's return. And then you take a player like Ace Bailey with Utah, where he is that prototypical, he's going to be the alpha scorer, but he's a little bit immature coming in from high school and college, maybe still a little bit raw. Shot selection might not be the best, but boy, he can hit some tough shots, right? But, he doesn't really pass the ball very much, doesn't really hit the glass very much, maybe not a huge impact defender. I think if you go back 10 or 15 years, Ace Bailey might be the number one pick in this class. And I think what you're starting to see, though, is, he wasn't even really a candidate this year, and he slipped out a little bit down the board. Even a guy like VJ Edgecombe went over him, which I thought was the right pick. And I think there's a little bit of a shifting priority for some of these teams. I think they're saying that, we don't need just an alpha scorer. It's okay if you can get us 35 points. That's not going to help us win basketball games at the highest level, right? Like, you're not going to do it by yourself. That's not how the best players of today are doing it. And it's not how the other best draft prospects are doing it. And so, it's not trying to shame Ace Bailey or write him off. Like, he can have a great career, but I think you're seeing some of the immediate success in the NBA. It's just a different formula.
It's a different formula, and it's also, I think, manifesting itself too. Like, Ja Morant has made everybody know, well aware he's not happy anymore. But there are not a lot of suitors camping on the doorstep right now. Who wants that in their locker room? Who wants that guy? And again, sleight of frame, plays that type of style of play, can't shoot. I mean, that was great for a while, but it seems like that time has passed already, and maybe he'll have a resurgence. Maybe he'll have a come to Jesus moment, and he'll understand that if he wants to come back, it's got to be on him, it's not everybody else's fault. But I just think
still waiting, still waiting for that breakthrough, but it goes back to the pace of play, playing at your own speed. Ja is an amazing passer, an amazing distributor, but it has to be drive and kick. It has to be, I'm getting all the way to the rim, I'm blowing past my defender, and then I'm finding the open guy, kind of drive and spray was really what he was great at. If you can't drive, right, if you're not the threat at the rim to score, you can't get by your guy like you used to, all of a sudden the passing stuff dries up too, and you don't have the three-point shot to come back on. So he's very much a downhill player as opposed to like the orchestrators that we're talking about with some of these other guys. And I just think there's a short shelf life on him. And you're right. I don't think there's a ton of interest in him. It's this kind of this group of like him and Zion and LaMelo Ball and Trae Young, where it's just a lot of, unfulfilled expectations and huge contracts and question marks. And maybe other teams are just saying, hey, that's somebody else's problem. We're going to try to maybe go a little bit younger.
Final thought. I think one of the greatest lines of all time that I've ever heard is Charles Barkley saying Zion Williamson is Shaq and his baby.
Yeah.
One of the funniest things I've ever heard anybody say.
Well, who else could say it, right?
Say it, and it was hilarious. Ben, thanks so much for the time today. Can't wait till we do it again, and I really appreciate your joining me here on the Deep Dive.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's a great time for the NBA, and NBA Cup's coming up. We'll get some good matchups, so definitely be a great time for all your listeners too.
Awesome. Ben Golliver, Washington Post, joining me, Paul Sir, here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City. Thanks, Ben. Man, oh man, that was fun.
I
hope I didn't take up too much of your day, but man, oh man, I just love it.
No, I